Remember when I asked that guest what a producer does?
I remember that guest was like bottom 3 guest.
Eddie, what does a producer do?
That's a good question.
Produces stuff.
Well, I think like the long convoluted answer here is job titles in Hollywood have stayed the same for decades, for generations, but technology has caused like the jobs to fundamentally change, right? And then also the financial business apparatus that governs the Hollywood ecosystem has also shifted, right? So like what a director did, for instance, during the studio system era, is very different than what happened call it during the 80s and 90s. And then what also complicates things is things change depending on the genre, if that makes sense, right? So like what a writer does in a comedy, as an example, is very different than what a writer does in an action movie versus a period drama.
Okay.
Right. So like the writer in the King's Speech, for instance, is doing something fundamentally different than the writers who wrote the Hangover. And I'm not saying like one's better than the other, but like comedies, for instance, especially after digital technology became a thing, comedies started using a lot of improv because we're no longer shooting on like film reels. So you can just keep the camera rolling. And so improv became a thing with comedies, right? So a lot of comedies then started being found in the edit. And so really, like when you look at like the entertainment ecosystem at large, it doesn't all work in one way. And then it's all been further complicated by streaming. So now, So I'm gonna like pivot this to my new show that's just out. Which is why
I'm happy to talk about your show, but I find it interesting that I understood and comprehended everything you've said, yet I know nothing about what a producer does.
No, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Right? So it's an ill-defined catch-all term, and that's fundamentally kind of the problem with it. And so it's like it's like the problem, and then also it's kind of okay at the same time because it doesn't really like have an issue. What I said just made absolutely no fucking sense. Sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't cause problems, so why change it? Yeah,
exactly. It doesn't cause any problems, right? But so, and the problem, in my opinion, is the producer could be the person who is actually physically like producing the project. And by that, I mean like scheduling finding the locations, like scheduling the shoots, figuring out like when, where, how this is being done. Right. The producer could also be like a brand, So, and by that example, I mean like, so sometimes it'll say like Steven Spielberg, produced by Steven Spielberg, or produced by Michael Bay, right? And sometimes that could just mean like, hey, look, this person is associated with this type of content. So,
yeah, it gives a little extra push brand, when Michael Bay is up there.
They don't do anything when they're a brand. They just help sell the film.
Yeah, I wouldn't say don't do anything, because again, it's a case by case basis, and it's very different, right? And I would argue that like marketing support sometimes is very crucial, right? And then sometimes, Yeah.
I'm reminded of the scene from Office Space where they ask, "What is it that you do?"
Yeah. No,
it's a people person.
Those engineers down there, they don't know how to work with people. I'm a people person.
Right.
What a great movie. That makes sense about the writers, though. It would be way easier to be a writer for a comedy that's not written in 1961, where you can kind of just be like, oh, let's just let John C. Reilly kind of riff for 2 minutes and we'll get something better.
Totally. And, so it ends up being like kind of a story structure thing, right? Also, I'm happy to answer more questions. Otherwise, I'll just keep rambling. But but also, so for my new show that just came out on Tuesday called The Guardians of Justice. The full title is The Guardians of Justice Will Save You. Okay. It's a spoof. It's effectively a spoof played completely straight of Batman and the Justice League. Okay. Yeah. So like that one, for just to kind of use it as an example. It's not just live action, it's live action, 2D animation, 3D animation, claymation, stop motion, pixel art, kind of all cross-pollinated together. And it shifts stop like within one scene, right? But okay. Whatever, I should get into that. But the reason the claymation is so important in this equation, right? So if I show you a live action still frame image, a live action image, right? And then I show you a cartoon and I intercut them, your mind will probably reject that because you're like, that's just a weird medium shift. Yeah. But then if I put in a shot of claymation in between it as a transition.
Oh no, I love claymation. When I mentioned that, what I was going to ask, like, that's really time intensive stuff, right? Like, you can point a camera at somebody and say, run across the room. And 3 takes. Well, how many takes do we need of this guy run across the room? Really? He didn't trip. But claymation, we're there for a while, moving like shaping.
Yeah.
And these are artists, not guys who are just saying, all right, now move his leg forward. There's an artist down there. That must be incredibly time.
Yeah. And this entire project took me 6.5 years. And I don't mean 6.5 years. Oh, I was developing it, and then I mean, like, literally, I was in production, like sculpting and for 6.5 years. And the point I was making about claymation, claymation's technically animation, right? As Kyle, as you pointed out, it's animation, but it's using live action photography because it's also real, and you're actually filming real stuff, right? So when you see now a live action shot, a 2D animation shot, and then you have claymation in the middle, all of a sudden it kind of allows your mind to accept the shifting mediums. So claymation ends up being the glue that holds all the mediums together.
That sort of transition between media formats, is that something that you thought of, or is that something, whose idea is that?
So that's it was me, but it's not like I thought of it. This is how my mind processes information. So like when I remember like my childhood or memories or whatnot, like it's usually in different forms of hyper reality. So sometimes it'll feel like cartoony, sometimes it will feel like more film noir. Sometimes it'll feel like literally like we're in a Looney Tunes Roadrunner piece. So this felt like an accurate representation of that. And I also I've chilled out more now. But I used to, when I was younger, I had like issues communicating, was not very good at that because I was dealing with like intense sensory overload. So I was trying to convey that in this show. So when you watch The Guardians of Justice, or if you do,
I plan to. I plan to.
It'll be like sensory overload, because that's again how I experience reality.
Okay. So
yeah.
I mean, the trailer looks really cool, and you can see very clearly, in the trailer on your channel. It's called the Guardians of Justice official trailer. If anyone wants to check it out, it looks very neat, very novel. Some people are getting shot and they're like exploding into coins, like video game style, and then other of the violence is more comic book with the kaboom, and other it's like a real guy stabbing another guy. So a mishmash. So I can see this holding attention very well.
Also, there's a language within the medium shifts. So there was like a language I was trying to infuse in it, and then also Taylor, yes, absolutely. You pointed out the whole thing is layered with video game language.
Oh, okay.
So I have which is why I was asking you guys about video games. It's like at the top of this, like there's like a Mortal Kombat announcer guy.
Oh, that's fun. Okay.
How did you get your job? Like, how did you, producer is not a starting job. How did you work your way up in the business?
Well, so I'm not really a producer at this point.
Okay.
So I'm not really a producer. What I started doing, I think in 2012 was the first one. I started working with other artists and then making fan films for YouTube. So the first one was a Punisher fan film called Dirty Laundry. The second one, and that one was kind of more down the middle, played very straight. Thomas Jane, who played the Punisher in the Lionsgate Punisher film, he reprised his role in the short film.
Oh, that's cool.
Very, very cool. Very, fortunate and crazy that this was a thing that I got to do. Very, very lucky. The follow up to that was a Venom short film, but the idea was not to do it completely straight. So it was done in the style of a black and white mock doc. It's an homage to a Belgian film called Man Bites Dog. And then there was there was a Judge Ed one. I think the most notorious one ended up becoming a hard R take on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
A hard R take on the Power Rangers. That I have to process that. All right.
Okay.
Well, the logic there, the logic that I had going in, they're child soldiers effectively, right? If you look at the concept of the Power Rangers, they're a bunch of high school kids, and a dude shows up in a tube and says, "Hey, there are these bad aliens that are coming. I'm going to give you weapons so you can go fight them." That's Blood Diamond. It's kind of like, it's the same genesis.
Yeah,
so
child soldiers with really cool outfits, but that's about it.
Right. Yeah. So it was and so that was that, and so I had the opportunity to work with really, really, really talented people on all these things, right? So it's not, but it was there's a great filmmaker named Phil Joannou who directed the Punisher one. Joe Lynch did the Venom one, and Joseph Kahn, who did the Power Rangers one, and there were others on top of that, right? There was a Mr. Rogers one, a James Bond one, a Pokemon one, but I think that ended up becoming this entry point where then companies and brands started coming to me and saying, "Well, what's your subversive take on this?" or that. And that's really when we're talking about my job, that's really what I do.
So you're more on the creative side of it, where you're not doing the scheduling like you said some producers might. You're more coming up with a novel way to tell these stories in a way that would be interesting for a large audience.
Yeah. And I, you know, to the effect of like scheduling, like I if anyone were to trust me with scheduling on anything, that would be a bad idea. I can't, you know what I mean? Like,
well, of course, you're over there. You're thinking in cartoons.
It doesn't work. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Yeah. And like, you know, like English isn't even like my first language, right? So like, I'm not from America. It's just there's like too much. I'm like, no. Although I do a good American accent, I do.
You're doing it right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know about some of the. So, how much did you have to do with the creation of all the like hero characters in Guardians of Justice? Was either like that a team effort, or did you kind of have all of this kind of set ready to go story when you were approached by people at Netflix?
So this one is my most personal project, right? What happened was around 2014, I got super depressed, like couldn't get out of bed. The world just felt gray. I was unhappy all the time.
I hear you, bro.
I couldn't even see reality. I didn't know what reality was, right? And it kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I couldn't even put, and I feel like I'm better at communicating today because I've worked on it. But back then I just didn't even know how to like communicate. So I was just like walking around and felt like everyone hated me. It was just not a good place. Right. So eventually I go to a doctor and the doctor's like, dude, this is like clinical depression. I need to put you on something called Zoloft, like right now. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I take this Zoloft and I feel nothing for a few minutes. Then about an hour and change later, it felt like Wizard of Oz. Like all of a sudden, like colors started getting brighter and like the cartoons started coming back. And like, you know, all of a sudden, like it felt like the birds were singing again. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, this is interesting.
Has it continued to help you since then? Like it, because I know some people will initially. Yeah,
that's a great question. I knew right away that like I needed to use this as a tool, but figure out what the root cause was, and not just like rely on this as a tool. But I can come back to that if that's something you guys are interested in hearing about.
Sure.
But as the medicines were kicking in, I started I'm a nerd, as you can tell. I'm nerdy things everywhere. If I flip the camera, there's more nerdy things. As a nerd, my mind immediately went to, well, you know, what if I was Wolverine? And, you know, Wolverine can't get drunk because Wolverine's healing factor just metabolized the alcohol, so he can't have medicine. And then I went, no, that doesn't make sense because Wolverine's healing factor is also psychological. So Wolverine would effectively block out all the things that were bothering him. But then I immediately went to Superman. I said, well, fuck, what would happen if Superman was depressed? I mean, it's not like there's like an intergalactic pharmacy to help him, right? And I've also since learned one of the things that I've uncovered is I have hypersensitivity. So there's like a element of like agoraphobia going on, like lights feel very bright, like sounds bother, you know, there's like I'm very, very, very hypersensitive, right? So I would feel a lot, feel everything, and that was contributing to the panic and the you know, that. And so now back to Guardians of Justice, as I was having the Superman thought, I went, okay, well, fuck. What happens if Superman's the one dealing with this? And then I went, okay, well, I'm going to write this. So, you know, I'm going to spoil this for you guys just because why not? Right. And the show's already out, but the show actually opens with Superman, the Marvelous Man, they call him Marvelous Man in the show. It's Superman. Addressing the TV, addressing the world, and saying, you know, I'm a prisoner in my own skin. which is exactly how I felt, right? Like I felt like a prisoner. I was like, what the fuck? He's like, I just hear too much. I feel too much. When I sleep and I wake up, people have died, and I feel it's my fault. Like I can't save everybody. Mm-hmm. And he's like, this is no way to live up my life. And he loads it's called caltrinite, but it's kryptonite, a caltrinite bullet into a gun, and he shoots himself on live TV.
What a way to go out. That's great.
So I've read the
good luck, everyone.
When their seemingly fearless leader self-destructs, a team of troubled superheroes must confront festering evil in the world and in themselves. That must be the troubled leader.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
so
that's very interesting.
That's pretty fucking dark. I'm down though. I'm down.
All right, Addy, you've really sold me on this. I want to see it now. It's going to be my next show.
Yeah, looks very, very cool. I've never seen a superhero kill themselves before. I don't think, right? I'm sure there's stories of them like, I'm going to die in front of a train to save the baby carriage or whatever, but not just straight up like Green Lantern's so depressed he like goes into the sun or something.
I think one of the Watchmen shot himself, but other than that, I can't think of any. No.
I don't know.
So yeah, this So this is again, it's a very personal story, right? It's I try to dramatize the feelings and the struggles and that, and then also, put in the cartoon hyper reality that I experience. And then I like kind of cool kung fu fight scenes. So I did like these, different fight scenes that were all inspired by different motifs and stuff.
It's really cool, and it's clear you went into this with like a very a vision. Like you said, it's very personal. Was it easy to get the people at Netflix to kind of agree with all of your vision, or was that an uphill battle getting them to see it the way you did?
It was not an uphill battle. It was shockingly easy. The challenge, though, was learning how to communicate what I was trying to do, both to myself and other people, right? Because again, when you watch the show, again, if you guys do, you'll see it transitions, because it's not like, one scene's in live action, the other scene's in claymation, then the scene's in cartoon. It all kind of happens together. And so, and there's like a logic and a thought process that's coming from me as to why this is happening, right? But then you then have to decode it and then translate it and then be like, okay, this is what we're doing, right? And yeah,
it's really cool. I've never seen a show set up like this with these wildly disparate versions of characters showing up.
Oh, that was cool. Yeah, I
was about to do ads. We're only an hour and 10 minutes in.
Yeah, I know. It just felt like two. Look, I like that guy. That guy seems like a nice fella. But I can't imagine working for him.
Very genuine, sincere guy. I like him.
I bet he's not a great communicator, though. I feel like if he was trying to tell me what my job was today, he might tell me for 5 minutes, and I'd be like, hey, could you run me through that one more time? And by the third time, I'd be like, he's going to fire me if I ask him once more. So I'm just going to pretend like I know what I'm doing with this clay guy.
I go both ways on the communication, right? Like there was one question where I asked him what a producer does, and I struggled to get details on what he does, although eventually I did. And then there was another time when he was telling me about the sort of the thought process on how his show started, the depression and whatever. I was riveted. And great communicator. Some might argue Elon Musk is a terrible communicator, but he can be riveting too.
Yeah.
So different styles of doing it.
You have to looking at the trailer for his show, it's incredibly novel. It's the disjointed feel of some late night Adult Swim stuff.
Yeah.
There's some of that in there, and that's a compliment when I'm saying it, because I love that kind of weird disjointed.
I hate that
stuff.
I hope it's not quite I hope it's a little
it's not going to be like that.
I'm going to watch it.
Superhero-ish.
I wish he hadn't spoiled the thing. He was.
I imagine that happens in the very beginning.
Yeah, they talk about the Superman part.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's the opening premise of the show, life without him.
No worries then.
Yeah.
No worries at all. I was worried that like maybe that's like how the show
It's the very end.
Yeah,
no.
Like, you know what? I'm not gonna save you. You're not worth saving. None of us are.
There's a little blurb where it's like the leader self-destructs and they have to live without him, and it's a show about that. Do you remember when I asked that guest what a producer does?
I remember that guest was like bottom 3 guests in my opinion we've ever. I don't mean as far as quality, like he was fine. I hated that cocksucker so much. God, I hated that fucking guy. And I don't mean that gay way. I don't think he actually sucks dick or anything. I just think he's a piece of shit. And I don't care if he does suck dick. I would much rather have the guy was awful. That was awful. He was so scatterbrained and all over the place.
He wouldn't answer any of the questions.
And I watched his piece of shit TV show up until like or movie.
I saw the whole thing. Yeah, Jackie and I watched it together.
Bridge too far for me. I got to the point where he's in it as like the mastermind, and I was like, okay, buddy, I didn't know you're an asshole and a retard. Like, I just turned it off after that. Like
an asshole I could deal with, but a retarded asshole. Get out of here.
That guy was the worst. Hey, so, all right, so you're a producer. What do you do? Well, I don't know.
It's like, well, we need
that would have been a better answer than what he gave, right?
It is a talk show.
He can hauled around for 5 minutes, like autistically about nonsense, and then we were still like, so again, as a producer, what would you say you do? And then he
during
hauled
the
around
course of
for
a
like
day. I feel like
minutes.
adding that tells people to describe their day and like what they really do.
That puts people in a corner. All those people who have made up like Twitter jobs or whatever, like they're like, well, I mean, on a given day, I don't know. They start like bullshitting around. Well, we mean like today? They have to ask about which day we want to break down all of a sudden. Because if you were a fucking chicken farmer, I'll tell you what, you'd be well, I get up real early. You know, I have to get breakfast in, a big one, because I'm going to need my energy. Gonna have to work hard until noon. I'll start out, and you'd know exactly. First, I check this to make sure everything hasn't, like, I haven't lost my entire net worth last night. All right, we're good. Nothing's on fire. Nothing is flooded. Like you'd know what you did as an accountant. I bet you know what your day is. Well, first I drink this coffee. I check this thing on my emails. Any job we've ever done at anything,
you can know describe it.
This guy is like, well, you know, it's which day? Like a Tuesday? Oh, I was on a Tuesday. I like to have some fruit.
I tried to ask him why it took.
Tuesday's sleeping.
That show took a super long time to make. I forget if it was 6 years or 12 years or whatever.
Or a decade or something.
And I was like,
asleep.
How can it take that long? How can it think? I was like, were you actually doing things on it? And I still don't remember my answer. But if I told you I had been mowing my yard for the last 7.5 years, you'd say, it's not a 7.5 year job. It can't take that long.
Yeah. See, with something like this, I could understand if you told me, well, look, I had the outline in college. I basically had it finished written after 2 years after that. A partner of mine, we finished the writing. But man, getting funding for this thing was a thing, and that took about 6 years. But the problem was to get the funding. There were some rewrites that took another couple. We had to hire some more people on, and finding people who would sign on to a project this late in the. I just made up a better answer than he could fucking come up with after 15 fucking minutes. Oh my God, it was infuriating. And there was that one part where I was like, dude, if you don't want to talk about your shit, frankly, neither do I. You just let us know.
You're like, I'm trying here. I'm talking about your show and things that we think you're interested in. I complimented you. I compared you to Graham Stoker's Dracula. I'm going to fuck that up a little bit. You're like, we're trying to stay in your wheelhouse. You can't hit it back. You asked us if we like playing video games. The fuck? That guy was weird. I generally don't tear down our guests, but if he came on here trying to be a bad guest, he couldn't have done that more.
He might have been, but did we get trolled? That could have been. Like, I'm almost willing to accept that. Like that is, being trolled is more likely than him being genuinely like that.
Yeah, because there were times I just remember how often you would ask, like, so tell me what's it like, the communication between the writers and the people who end up making the visual effects, and he'd be like, "There's a lot." and that would be, you remember that it'd be like 15 seconds of pregnant pause and then no answer, because you for the first 5 seconds you're like, he's kind of pensive, he's thinking, he's formulating what he wants to say, and then over the next 5 seconds you're like, he isn't. No, he is not. He is like staring at me like someone in a video game when I need to hit X to move on to the next conversation topic. Like, don't NPC me, man. Like, give me something here.
Standing there wiggling a little in the wind.
Yeah,
we had a lost
fight
episode.
Animation.
What was the guy's name from Arrested Development that we had?
Oh, the Asian fellow.
Yeah,
Brandon?
Yeah.
Was it Brandon?
I don't remember. I
remember him having a non-Asian name. Like it was
what was
like
his Arrested Development name? Ang?
Oh. He was like the adopted brother or something. I've never seen Arrested Development, so he, I probably should. It's got a lot of people I like in it.
Justin Lee, I think, was his name. Justin. And he played An Young.
Yeah, he was in the it was like they had a not a remake, but like a revival of that show, right? And he was in that, I think. And he was
maybe
I don't know. He seemed real big on himself, and he was.
That was the big thing. That was my takeaway from him. I half jokingly asked if like girls and hangers on just try to use his celebrity, and he's like, "This, I'm more famous than him," and he was like, "Yeah,
it was. I remember that. Yeah, what's it like? Woody's mocking him to his face, mind you. What's it like being a big deal celebrity when you can't walk the streets without pussy dripping on your fancy ass fly shoes that you probably wear?" And he's just like, "Man, I got some new shit. Keeps that pussy juice right off my fancy shoes." Like he just acted like that really was his lifestyle. Yeah. Meanwhile, not seriously, Woody's way more famous than that guy. None of you know who we're describing right now out there listening. And granted, you are our audience, but go poll somebody on the fucking street. And they're not gonna know who this guy is or what his name is.
See if they know
but he was
the name
annoying.
Behind
but it wasn't just that like he thought he was fancy. He was just an annoying guy. We've had a few guests that turned out to be like pieces of shit, but by and large, we have a good guest here. I think. I'm just sad we didn't get Slush Puppy tonight. I wanted to talk to him.
I like him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's funny.
Yeah, that guy's got such a great personality. He's just so I don't know, kind of a free spirit.
And he doesn't recoil in horror when we try to sell cum pills.
No, I think down there they're a little bit. They haven't gotten as PC as we have, and I think they're still a little rough around the edges in the southern hemisphere.
So you're Addie. It took 6.5 years to make. How It shocks me that someone had the patience and the funding to keep that afloat for that period of time. Was that hard? Did you have to like every year be like, guys, trust me, it's going to be cool. How did you keep that afloat?
That's a great question. It was definitely like emotionally challenging, right? Because I felt like people just being like, come on, dude, like really, it was like that. I was getting not haters. It's not like a hater thing. It's more of like, hey, are you sure you're not out of your mind? And I'm like, well, I'm a little out of my mind, but like, I can still get this across the finish line. I just don't want to abandon it, until I realized the vision. So it was hard. Now, but you use the word afloat, Woody?
Yeah.
The word afloat.
Because
right?
in my head, someone wants to pull the rug out from you along this way. You have to fight to keep it going, maybe. So
no, that's true. And also you're also fighting your own impulse of like wanting to abandon things and be like, oh, fuck, because look, at the same time, right, I was coming off of, some successes in my past. So like I had opportunities that I was like turning down or not engaging with, or really didn't have the capacity to engage with because I was like hyper focused on like this. And it just felt like this was something I had to do and get out there. Otherwise, I couldn't move on with my life. But then the word afloat is interesting because here's where the expenses of productions go, right? Production is very expensive. Like the actual physical production is very, very expensive because there's a lot of people, the locations,
and artists are being employed. Right.
Yeah, because it regardless of it being a small indie movie or a ginormous blockbuster movie, there's a lot of money being spent every second, every minute. And that's why sets are so big, right? Because you need like an encase and encase that and encase that and encase, just systems in place, right? And then also the other very expensive part of production is the final part of post-production. So that's when the visual effects happen, the color correction, all that piece, right? So expense here. Sorry, I'm trying to like match with the camera, but it's like in reverse. So expense here. There was like a long in-between period where me and a couple editors would just come in and be like, okay, so now it's cool. We have the raw materials with the live action piece. So there's a shot here. Now here's where it transitions into claymation. Here's where it transitions into cartoon, and that. So we really constructed the show here. Does that make sense? So here's the make a visual aid. So here is the production. Here is like the when you do the visual effects and the color and the animation and everything. In between was when it was like me and like a couple editors going in and being like building the framework of it using the live action footage, along with like, okay, well, so here's where we drop in an animation shot and this is the style of it. And here's when we transition into that. And then, so I'm saying that it wasn't like a ginormous cost burn here.
Right. But it was long.
Right. It was just long and very tedious.
Decided in the middle, right? Because I would think if you were to make a show that before the first frame of footage is shot, you guys would know every frame that you need. And
okay. So absolutely, you're absolutely correct. It's not that the show was decided in the middle. I didn't have the full vocabulary over here to explain exactly how this intersects with that, right? And because there wasn't a reference, because there isn't a lot of stuff like this that's mixed media, it's more like I had to do it myself. Because I couldn't call someone up and say, hey, can you do this, and this, and this? Like, what are you talking about?
I'm curious. So you're a pretty young guy. How old are you?
I just turned 37.
Oh, you look younger than you are.
Yeah.
At what age are people best at this job? I'm thinking about it in my head, making an argument, right? Like you make a guy, 68 years old, and perhaps he's a little stuck in his ways, out of date, not in touch with the audience, and not hyper aware of like what can be done nowadays. Well, you make a guy 22 and he's just not experienced. He doesn't foresee the problems you bump into. Like he's just bad at his job because he's new at it. What age are people best at this?
I think it also depends in terms of genre, right? So when you look at like comedy, comedy is like a youngish person's game. Right. But then when you look at like sci-fi epics, like, I mean, Ridley Scott, who's a great filmmaker, did Alien, Gladiator, Blade Runner, House of Gucci was his last film out. Like, he's still doing it. He's still crushing. And Ridley Scott's ancient. He's literally ancient.
Probably doesn't like that description.
But it's like, I heard M. Night Shyamalan talking about this, and so I'm gonna reference what he said because I feel like it's accurate. M. Night Shyamalan was like super young when he made The Sixth Sense, right? So when you're young and you're a young artist, you are operating primarily based off of impulse, and you don't really know what you're doing, but you're feeling your way through it. And that's when the magic happens. That's really when you get like the real breakout, like, whoa, where the fuck did that come from? The breakout stuff, right? And then as artists mature, they start leaning more and more into the craft of it. So it's no longer like impulse. It's now you're leaning into the craft. So there's a filmmaker named Wes Anderson, who, his first movie, I believe, was called Bottle Rocket. And then he did Rushmore, Royal Tenenbaums. And now it's like Grand Budapest Hotel, Moonrise Kingdom. But if you look at his filmography, his vision gets more and more specific every time, right? The color palettes get more honed in, like the wardrobe and the fashion gets more and more Wes Anderson-y, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that there is a strike zone where people are best at the job. I think it really matters. It really comes down to like, what genre are we talking about? And what kind of material are we talking about within the genre? Like I feel like a movie like Saw within the horror genre, a movie like Saw or Hostel could have only been made by a young person, because you don't get like a 65-year-old dude who wants to make Saw or Hostel, right? But then like The Shining is another example for a horror film, and that was Kubrick, and he was an older man at that point in his life. So it just comes down to what the material is and what tools you have available to you to tell that story. And I think as long as there's like a passion there, and there's like a just a straight up like passion to tell this story, I don't think age actually matters at all.
No. Yeah, or maybe instead of saying it doesn't matter, that different ages bring different strengths.
Yeah, exactly. Age is a variable, but it is not like a key defining a thing. Now, I will say, I will make one caveat to that.
Mm-hmm. So
on big blockbuster movies, like something like a Fast and Furious, where you're dealing with a lot of special effects, a lot of stunts, and a lot of like personalities, right? Because those movies are filled of like international household name types. It's probably better to get someone who with a lot of experience under their belt, because dealing with the stunts and just kind of the special effects, and also managing the personalities.
The gravitas helps more manage personalities too. Yeah. Okay. Huh.
That's a great question, man.
We lose Addy in about 5 minutes. Has Netflix told you how well your thing's doing? How well your shows are going? Do you have any numbers?
Nope.
Do you get them ever?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because
I don't really like. I don't really care. So I'm not going to like really ask or anything, because it's like, to me the gift was being able to make it.
Yeah. Or was it being able to show it to people? Is it important to you?
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Is it more important that it just is done, that you have completed it, or that people see it? Which do you think is more important?
Definitely more important that it got done, because if it didn't get done and people saw it, it would be
terrible.
Yeah, then it would be like, wow, you suck.
I saw that thing you didn't make and I hated it.
Yeah.
Is it more important that you think it's good or that other people do?
Fair.
So, and again, I'm not trying to be difficult here, and I apologize if this comes across as being difficult. I'm just trying to be authentic. I don't think that there's something as good and bad. It's all completely subjective, and things that are like considered really bad at one time in history, then like years later are like looked at as masterpieces, and things that were masterpieces in their day are looked back and people are like, what the fuck were they all smoking? That's awful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. And I think when people watch things, they're bringing their own biases of their own life and their own experience in it. So, it's like, it's like, I don't.
So we started as, is it more important that you think it's good or other people? Because that's a question I ask myself a lot.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. It's just, it's not like good or bad. It's more like, is this like an expression of what I was trying to like do and get across? And did I achieve that? And it's a question of like effort, right? Like I remember in school, I was really good at some subjects and I wasn't at others. Hyper good at certain things, then like hyper bad at others.
Yeah.
And it then dawned on me, I think when I was like 14, I was like, the end result here doesn't matter. It's a question of how much effort I put in. Because if I just, it's an effort thing. Because I'm like, if I'm not good at this thing and I put effort into it, that's worth more than the outcome. Because if it was just completely outcome derived, then I would literally just focus on the things that I'm good at. I want to like work every day to become a well-rounded like human being, a better artist, right? So so like even with this show, I spent a lot of time managing the production schedule, for instance. I didn't do it every day, but I spent a lot of time managing the production schedule, like thinking through that stuff, which is like stuff that I'm not good at. But again, it was also like, I want to develop this because I can't just like lean on I'm not good at that. Well, okay, but if you work on it, you'll get better, and then this may not become part of your job, but at least with a knowledge of this, you get better at your core competency, right?
Yeah, I like where your head is there on the effort thing. Like it's never how I've been wired. Like I literally don't care how hard you tried. I only care how well you did. When I measure a project, like don't come to me and say with your fucking macaroni drawing and say, I worked on this for 7 days. Yes, but it's crap. I know 5-year-olds who could do this. It doesn't matter to me that you tried hard at something that turned out terribly. I measure how good the product is. And on this show, I'm usually right. Usually when the show ends and I think it's good, it turns out to be good. But it doesn't matter what I think. I just care if the other people liked it. Sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that was kind of a dud. And it gets good reviews. And sometimes I'm ready to drop the mic and they're like, no, Woody, that actually sucked. But usually I line up with what the fans think. And I only care what the fans think.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, if we're having a good time, it's a good show. If I enjoy doing the show, then you'll enjoy watching the show. Is what I found like 100% of the time. If I get done with the show and like I'm like almost a little sore from how much I've been laughing, and I'm like rubbing my cheeks, like I'm like, that was a really good show.
That totally makes sense. Woody, yeah. I want to just contribute one observation that just came to me in reference to what you said. So because I didn't grow up in any one country or any one civilization, right? So it's like India, Hong Kong, like Singapore, all these like different societies. There never seemed to be like a consensus in any one place. Or sorry, if there was a consensus, it was like isolated to that one society. But when you go to the next, there'd be just like a completely different set of rules and a completely different set of values and a completely different sense of like, oh, this is what we put on a pedestal and this is what we kind of look down at. And I think that's what ultimately shaped that perspective that I have.
Okay. That makes sense. Which one of those areas do you think impacted that the most? Singapore, or, they must be a lot more effort driven, a combination of all of it?
No, it's the collective. It's the collective, right? It's the act of like being three, viewing the world one way, then going somewhere else where it's a different set of rules, then packing up, leaving everyone, going to a completely different civilization where everyone looks different, And then all of a sudden, completely different set of rules. Everyone dresses different. Like what's cool is complete departure to what was cool here. And then doing it again and again and again. And then you realize like, yeah, like there's like a lack of the homogenous thing doesn't exist. And things that are a big deal in one place are just like not even blips in the other, right? Like,
yeah. What was the reason you were moving around so much? Was it a parent's job that you were constantly bouncing around?
Yeah, it was a parent's job. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was tough. It was tough. I moved to I gotta go, but I moved to America by myself when I was 16. Sorry, 15. Wow. When I was 15. Yeah. And
geez, that must be tough.
Yeah, and then it was very tough. And then 2 days later, 9/11 happened, and I was like,
"That's some terrible timing."
Yeah. I was like, "What the fuck?" And I had nothing to do with the
9/11. You are a little brown skinned.
Kyle, you're muted.
Guys, I want to thank you for having me on your show. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for the great questions. Also,